At exactly 3:12 in the morning, a man camping alone in the woods woke up to the sound of slow footsteps circling his tent. At first, he thought it was an animal. But when he finally opened the tent and shined his flashlight into the darkness, he realized something had been standing there, watching him, for a very long time. Daniel had always enjoyed camping alone. For him, being surrounded by nothing but trees and silence felt like an escape from the chaos of everyday life. No traffic, no phones constantly buzzing, just nature. In the fall of 2018, Daniel decided to spend a weekend camping in a forest about 2 hours away from his town. The area was known locally as Pine Hollow. It wasn't a famous national park or a busy campground. Pine Hollow was mostly untouched forest. There were a few old trails used by hikers, but most of the area was quiet and rarely visited. Daniel arrived just before sunset. The sky was glowing orange behind the tall pine trees, and the cool autumn air made the entire forest feel calm and peaceful. He parked his truck near a dirt trail and walked about half a mile into the woods until he found a small clearing that seemed perfect for camping. Tall trees surrounded the area on all sides. The ground was mostly flat, covered in dry leaves that crunched softly under his boots as he walked. Daniel set up his tent, gathered a few pieces of firewood, and started a small campfire. For the next few hours, everything felt perfect. The fire crackled softly while the forest slowly darkened around him. Occasionally he could hear distant animals moving through the trees, but nothing felt unusual. After eating dinner, Daniel sat beside the fire just watching the flames dance in the darkness. But around midnight, something about the forest began to feel strange. The sounds slowly disappeared. The insects stopped. The wind faded, and soon the forest became completely silent. Not peaceful silence, the kind of silence that feels wrong. Daniel noticed it immediately. For a moment he paused and listened carefully. Nothing. No wind moving through the branches. No animals. Just complete stillness. Eventually he shrugged it off. Forests sometimes go quiet at night, especially when predators are nearby. After a while, the fire burned down, and Daniel climbed into his tent to sleep. At that moment, everything still seemed completely normal. Daniel had been asleep for several hours when suddenly he woke up. At first, he didn't understand what had woken him. Then he heard it. Footsteps. Slow footsteps moving through the leaves outside his tent. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. Pause. Daniel opened his eyes and stayed completely still. His first thought was that it might be a deer wandering through the campsite. Deer were common in that forest, but something about the footsteps didn't feel right. They sounded too slow, too deliberate. The footsteps continued moving around the campsite. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. Pause. Daniel slowly sat up inside the tent and listened carefully. Whatever was outside wasn't just walking past, it was circling the tent. For several minutes, the footsteps moved around him again and again. Daniel's heart started beating faster. He quietly reached for the flashlight lying beside him and held it tightly in his hand. The thin walls of the tent glowed faintly from the moonlight outside, but he couldn't see any shapes moving. Then suddenly, the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed felt even worse. Daniel waited. 10 seconds passed. Then 20. Still nothing. Just as he started to relax, a new sound appeared. A soft scratching noise, right against the side of the tent. The sound slowly dragged across the fabric, like something running its fingers along it. Daniel froze. The scratching moved slowly across the wall of the tent, then stopped near where his head was. For a moment, everything went quiet again. Then the scratching started again, this time directly above him. Something was touching the top of the tent. Daniel tried to convince himself it was an animal climbing on the tent. Maybe a raccoon. Maybe a fox. But deep down, he knew something was wrong. Animals don't move like that. Animals don't slowly circle tents in the middle of the night, and animals definitely don't drag their fingers across fabric. Then Daniel heard something that made his stomach drop. Breathing. Slow, heavy breathing. Right outside the tent. Daniel held the flashlight tightly and slowly reached toward the zipper of the tent. His hands were shaking. Every instinct told him not to open the tent, but another part of him needed to know what was out there. Slowly, he pulled the zipper open. The sound seemed incredibly loud in the silent forest. When the opening was big enough, Daniel pointed the flashlight into the darkness. At first he saw nothing, just trees. Then the beam of light moved slightly to the left, and that's when he saw it. Standing between two trees about 30 feet away was a tall, dark figure. Perfectly still. The shape looked human, but something about it was deeply unsettling. It was too tall, and far too thin. Its arms hung unusually long at its sides. The figure stood there silently, staring directly at the tent. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Then suddenly, the figure took one slow step backward. It slipped behind the tree and disappeared. Daniel didn't sleep for the rest of the night. He stayed inside the tent with the flashlight in his hand, listening to every sound in the forest. Nothing else happened. As soon as the sun began to rise, Daniel packed his things as quickly as possible and left the campsite. But before leaving, he noticed something disturbing in the dirt around the tent. Footprints. Bare footprints. They circled the entire campsite again and again. But what truly terrified Daniel was this. The footprints didn't lead into the forest, and they didn't lead out. According to Daniel, the footprints simply started beside his tent, as if whatever had been watching him all night had already been there before he arrived.